funded by the taxpayer or by universities should be able to access it. Because of this, they believed there had to be a common, universal language that would underpin how the new communication network operated. Steve Crocker, the inventor of some of the early protocols that the internet runs on, said that they were looking for ways to make the procedures open so that they could be added to, changed and updated democratically. Importantly, no single institution should be in charge. When administrators at MIT started locking doors or putting passwords on computers that until then anyone could book a slot to use and experiment, students and researchers would fight back. They started calling themselves hackers. Young enthusiast Richard Stallman recalls that
anyone who dared to look at terminal, say because he was a professor and thought he was more important than other people, would likely find his door left open until the next morning. I would just climb over the ceiling along the floor, move the terminal out, or leave the door open with a note saying what a big inconvenience it is to have to go under the floor. So please do not any longer. There is a big wrench in the AI lab entitled the 7th Floor Master Key, to be used in case anyone dares to lock up one of the more fancy terminals.
as ARPANET proved useful, other government agencies wanted in. The NSF, the National Science Foundation, created NSF-NET in 1985, and eventually it linked more universities across the country. In 1977, the first transmissions were made wirelessly around the world, under the sea, into space, and then back to where they started. And by the early 80s, the NSF was investing heavily in infrastructure. They built a backbone across the US that could connect universities with other research institutions. Today, the NSF website states that throughout its existence, NSF-NET carried, at no cost to institutions, any US research and education traffic that could reach it. At the same time, the number of internet-connected computers grew from 2,000 in 1985 to more than 2 million in 1993. To handle the increasing data traffic, the NSF-NET backbone became the first national 45 megabits per second internet network in 1991. Any school could apply for a grant from the NSF to connect to the network, but its popularity was to become its undoing. By the 90s, the infrastructure was becoming overburdened, and there wasn't much appetite to increase funding at the height of the neoliberal period. The NSF continued to upgrade, but it couldn't keep up with demand. Data was, and is, measured in packets, and in 1988, 1 million packets of traffic were sent across the network. By 1992, just 4 years later, this had increased to 150 billion. Commercial use was banned. The network was to be used for research and education only. A 1982 MIT handbook states that
personal messages to other ARPANET subscribers, for example, to arrange a get-together or check and say a friendly hello, are generally not considered harmful. Sending electronic mail over the ARPANET for commercial profit or political purposes is both antisocial and illegal. By sending such messages, you can offend many people.
At the same time, small commercial operators began to provide alternatives using the same protocols as NSF-NET and often hiring DARPA researchers. Pressure to change how the network operated was increasing as more and more people and more institutions wanted to join. In 1991, Democratic Senator Al Gore began working on a high-performance computing and communications act, in it arguing that, of course, the market should have access to this new information superhighway, but a middle road was important. Senator Daniel Inouye argued that legislation should preserve 20% of the infrastructure for public use to provide, quote, libraries, education, non-profits, government agencies, museums, to provide educational, informational, cultural, civic or charitable services directly to the public without charge. This would be modelled on the Public Broadcasting Act to complement private media with publicly funded, advertisement-free programmes for television and radio to provide an alternative. Like roads, the information superhighway was, after all, public property. A group called the Telecommunications Policy Roundtable was formed. Its co-founder, Jeffrey Chester, told the New York Times in 1993,
"There should be a national debate about what kind of media system we should have. The debate has been framed so far by a handful of communications giants who have been working overtime to convince the American people that the data highway will be little more than a virtual electronic shopping mall."
It looked most like a public-private partnership was inevitable, and Gore, with his support for a public internet, became Bill Clinton's running mate for president. But when Clinton won the election in 1993, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, visited him and convinced him that the new computer network, in industries and banking's hands, could revolutionise the economy. By using vast stores of data and supercalculation to hedge against investments, the US could enter into a new era of prosperity in which the economy would be perfectly balanced and everyone prospered, leaving behind a period of boom and bust. Meanwhile, Clinton, Gore and the Democratic Party received $120,000 in contributions from a consortium of telecommunications giants. Suddenly, Gore changed his mind about the public-private partnership. Telecommunications should be deregulated, the NSF net infrastructure should be sold off, and all left to the whims of the market.
American consumers want the choices that competition provides. Communications Act of 1995 will give them those choices. Communications Act of 1995 will promote competition in practically all telecommunication markets.
As this was happening, the NSF had subcontracted the running of the network to a consortium called Merit. Merit was made up of representatives from universities, research institutions, and important computing businesses like IBM. In 1991, Merit began selling access to the network for the first time to more and more businesses. They were accused of backroom dealing and profiting from the network. So many were outraged that congressional hearings were called in 1992. Businessman William Schrader testified that it was like giving a federal park to Kmart. But it was too late. It was decided that NSFNet would be carved up and transferred to the corporations. With the infrastructure handed over, it was officially decommissioned in 1995 with hardly a whimper of protest. A couple of years later, in 1998, the Washington Post reported that
the nation's local, long-distance, and wireless phone companies have spent $166 million on legislative and regulatory lobbying since 1996, more than the tobacco, aerospace, and gambling lobbies combined.
Top donors during the 1997 to 1998 political year were AT&T with almost $2 million, Bell Atlantic with just over $1.5 million, Bell South with the same, CBC with $1.2 million, and MCI with almost $1 million. The money was donated to candidates across both parties. Democratic Edward J. Markey, who was heavily involved in telecommunications legislation, received $124,000 in donations, but Clinton himself was the top recipient, receiving $169,000. With that, at least $1 billion in today's money of public investment in the networks have been transferred with little fanfare to the private sector. The internet is part of a long history of computing that's relied on public money and public investment. From that first computer to the father of modern computing, Alan Turing, working on World War II government projects in Britain, and the first IBM digital computer, being the result of a Department of Defense contract during the Korean War. Furthermore, California's economy more broadly rests on government defense investment of planes and missiles and military electronics, as well as irrigation systems, highways and universities. The Pentagon has had a big hand in helping corporations invest in R&D in everything from jet engines to transistors, circuits, lasers and fiber optics.